Well, let's recap our top story, too, if you've missed it today. The U.S. Supreme Court rejecting U.S. President Donald Trump's global sweeping tariffs today. In a 6-3 decision, the justices upholding a lower court ruling that the president's use of a 1977 law meant for use in national emergencies exceeded his authority. The court reached the decision in a legal challenge from businesses affected by the tariffs, as well as 12 U.S. states. But Trump saying today that he is going to sign an executive order at some point this afternoon to institute a new 10% global tariff under Section 122. That's the Trade Act of 1974. So speaking after the ruling, Trump called the Supreme Court decision, quote, deeply disappointing, adding that he's ashamed of certain members of the court.
When you read the dissenting opinions, there's no way that anyone can argue against them. There's no way. Foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years are ecstatic. They're so happy. And they're dancing in the streets, but they won't be dancing for long.
Okay, CTV's Jeremie Charron joins us now from our Ottawa bureau. Jeremie, again, wide-ranging topics. I don't think necessarily unexpected what we heard from Donald Trump. We have this new 10% global tariff now under Section 122. Do we know yet how that's going to affect the other sectoral tariffs that are on Canada? We're just still trying to figure that out, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, Matt, and I think to your point, everyone at this point is trying to best understand and make sense of what U.S. President Donald Trump announced today. I think one thing that is fairly certain is that the Section 232 tariffs, the sectoral tariffs, if you will, on the auto sector, on steel and aluminum, on lumber, those sectoral tariffs should remain unchanged. What we heard today from U.S. President Donald Trump, as you've touched on, is a new 10% global tariff. So under Section 122, which is a new section, the statute that he is going to use to impose tariffs, the U.S. Supreme Court's decision today struck down, the implementation of the fentanyl-related tariffs related to the fentanyl emergency that U.S. President Donald Trump declared. That was 35% on Canada, 10% on goods that are not covered by CUSMA, 10% on energy products. And also the global reciprocal tariffs, which were tariff rates at various different percentages for countries around the world. Those are all gone. They have been struck down by the Supreme Court, deemed unlawful. What is not, definitively clear, Donald Trump today said that he was signing an executive order to impose 10% global tariffs over and above the normal tariffs already being charged. Not clear if he's talking about other tariffs, in Canada's case under Section 232, or in China's case 301. There are various tariffs that are there. What seems to be clear is he does not have the power to reinstate the global reciprocal tariffs at the high rates that they existed, or tariffs at a high rate of 35% that were imposed on Canada through Section 122. He is limited in his power through Section 122, as you've touched on, Matt, and some of our other guests have, to a maximum tariff rate of 15% and limited to 150 days. Beyond that, he would have to seek congressional approval. So there are limits as to what he can impose. It would appear that this is, a 10% global tariff that he's imposing instead of all the tariffs that were struck down today by the Supreme Court. That would still result in, across the board, significantly lower tariff rates for all countries that were facing tariffs from U.S. President Donald Trump. And, to answer your initial question, Matt, unclear whether or not that 10% tariff rate will be applied to Canada in lieu of the 35% tariffs that were removed, and whether CUSMA would allow us to get a carve-out. There are still a lot of questions in terms of how this will all be, imposed, but a lot to unpack, and certainly, significant developments here in terms of the trade policies that U.S. President Donald Trump is moving forward with. All that despite he continued to talk about today the fact that he feels as though this decision by the U.S. Supreme Court empowers his office to impose tariffs without really explaining that. It wasn't clear because, as we all clearly saw, the Supreme Court struck down a large majority of those tariffs. So Like, there's a lot that is left for everyone to unpack and try and make sense of today from what we heard from the president. Nonetheless, 10% global tariffs is a sure thing. Definitive impact on Canada, still unclear at this point. We're seeking further clarification from the Prime Minister's office and any Canadian officials that'll answer that today.
Right, and not necessarily even knowing if the Prime Minister's office or otherwise knows the exact impact of this. Are we going to hear, Jeremie, just quickly before I let you go, are we going to expected to hear from the Prime Minister? Are we going to hear from Mark Carney at any point today? Probably, likely not, or have we heard?
Yeah, nothing scheduled at this point. We have not heard back on whether or not he's going to speak or clarification. Look, you know, the minister in charge of Canada-U.S. trade is Minister Dominic LeBlanc. We've reached out to his office for some clarification. You know, hopeful that we will get some kind of answer. But I think to your point, Matt, you know, to be clear, perhaps there were some communication ahead of what was being announced today. We don't know. That's complete speculation. But they are probably also trying to discern everything that was announced and what the impact is on Canada, as is every other country at this point, I think. There's a lot of, you know, there are a lot of things that remain unclear right now.
Yeah, so more uncertainty at this point. Okay, CTV's Jeremie Charron in Ottawa for us. Thanks, Jeremie, for this.